There we go. I hope that works. All right. Well, class size shrunk in half once the high schoolers figured out they didn't have to be here. So that's okay. We'll go through it without them. Good morning. Today we will be jumping through time to the end of Judges. We started in the beginning with Gideon. Well, not the very beginning. I guess that was Othniel. Yeah, another name I can't pronounce. I'm one of those people when I read a book and I run across a name I don't know, I just pronounce it one way and I pronounce it that way through the rest of the book, and then I find out later, oh yeah, it was never supposed to be pronounced that way. Oh well, if the authors had put in pronunciation guidelines, that might not make a difference for me. So, Gideon was actually the fifth, but he was toward the beginning of Judges, and that's where he started. We are going to cover today, excuse me, this is a little bit loud for me, Samson. Is the last judge in the book of Judges before they go to Eli and Samuel in the book of Samuel. So we're going to skip quite a bit. But one thing we aren't skipping is what Israel has done and their behavior through the whole book of Judges. They're pretty well on a pattern of wash, rinse, and repeat. Like I've said for a few weeks now, that's what Israel's on, that pattern. So we'll go over and we'll take a look at Samson. He was a little bit different kind of guy. Every time you think of Samson, I think of, the guy for the logo, I guess, of Gold's Gym that looks like he has a 6-foot shoulder and about a 28-inch waist and it's just rippled muscle. That's what I think of Samson. Huh? Well, he's not the brightest, as we're going to find out. He's absolutely. So we're going to start it this morning. We're going to take a look at Samson. We'll see some of his hang-ups. Some of us may be able to relate to his hang-ups. Others may not. So let's get started off with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this opportunity to present Samson, another judge that you put before Israel, Lord. Can we go over him? May each person take away something unique characteristic that they can learn, that your word and your will be shine through in his many faults that we can learn from, and we can learn to notice them in ourselves and correct them, Lord. I ask that you be with me as I present, be with Jeff as he gives the sermon this morning, Lord, and be with the rest of the congregation as we go into another week. We ask these things in your name. Amen. So when we do think about Samson, that's what we think about. And we also think about his famous companion, Delilah. Delilah is actually number 4 in line, not number 1. And that's just what we're told. So we're going to go through his life and what Samson went through. We'll try to cover it as quick as we can. But one of the interesting things about Samson here in this story is God knew him before he was conceived and said what his life would be like. And that's interesting because God said to his mom, you will have a son, he will conceive a son, and this is what he will do. And so just on a side note, that really goes to God knowing us while we're still in our mother's wombs and still growing. So let's start off with Samson's birth. Judges chapter 13, 1 through 25. And if we can start reading there. Much better. So, here we have the explanation and the birth of Samson. When we first start off this chapter, what familiar patterns do we see? It's the same things that we've seen for a while. It sounds like a broken record. They do. And what group was oppressing him this time? The Philistines. Imagine that. I'm just going to say that. Imagine that. Where do we know this from? Absolutely. And what do we know about Manoah's wife? What else? She doesn't. It took me a second to read them. I'm like, what do we know? What's her name? I can pronounce that one. No name. What do we know about her? She is. She is barren. She's been barren for a while. So who appeared to the wife? An angel of the Lord. We're going to find out something special about this angel because, we're going to hit that wonderful word again. And we're going to see why we also consider it a Christophany. And what was his message? Absolutely. Do you think she believed him? No.
But in that time, especially, it was for the women not to have children was almost like a curse to them.
Oh, yeah.
And so here she is, and I find it different from Hannah. This lady didn't ask the Lord for a son.
Right.
Where Hannah did ask the Lord for a son.
Yep. No, and back that time it was in a lot of modern history, i.e. after Jesus' death, it was still considered bad form, so to speak, for women not to get pregnant. I mean, that's
That was their social security.
exactly.
They had a son who would provide for them and their family.
All right, in an agricultural society, which is a lot of what that was back then, you had the eldest, you wanted an eldest boy, preferably two. Third one, okay, that's, we'll be happy with girls at that point. But they would carry on the farm. They would carry on what you're doing. If you were a blacksmith, that's what your son learned. If you were, raised corn for a living, that's what you learned back then. In today's society, that's not so much. I mean, you have, parents that, maybe small engine mechanics or maybe, lawyers, and their kids go off to be art patrons, whatever that means, or they go off into different forms of business. So I have a friend whose kid went off to be an art patron, and he's like, why? But anyway, the family was also a closer knit, so they needed kids in that. What were the specific instructions given for this child? And if you don't remember what it was, I'll be reading them too. What specific instructions was it?
Good prenatal care, mainly no wine, no alcohol, and no unclean meat.
Okay, and what were the instructions to the child after he was born? The same. And it's called the Nazarite, the vow of the Nazarite. And I'm going to read back in Numbers, starting in 6:2, if you want to follow along. Numbers 6:2 through 8, so we can get a real clear picture of the instructions. Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when either a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of the Nazarite, to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar. Easy thing to do, very easy. Made from wine or strong drink, and shall not drink any juice of grapes or eat grapes, fresh or dried. So that means no raisins. Easy. All of the days of his separation, he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. I don't know who would skin a grape. All the days of his vow of separation, no razor shall touch his head, until the time is completed for which he separates himself to the Lord. He shall be holy. He shall let the locks of his hair of his head grow long. All the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body. Easy. Not even for his father or for his mother, for brother or sister, if they die, shall make himself unclean, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation, he is holy to the Lord. So, this is the vow of the Nazarite. And some interesting things: stay away from grapes of any kind, wine and strong drink. And when he says any kind, it means the raisins, the skins, all of it. You don't even walk near a grapevine. Well, grapes were really prevalent in that time, so it's a big thing. It's a big thing. No razor shall touch the hair of his head. There's absolutely no way I could ever do this one in about 2.5, 3 months. It's too much. I can't do it. But to have hair that long back then as a guy, I mean, I look at Myron's girls and they've got hair that's really long, you know. But this is Samson. He was not to have his head shaved. It was part of the vow. And then the last one, I mean, as you read it and you say, not near dead bodies. Well, that sounds, pretty easy. Stay away from chariot accidents. Don't go into battle. But if you read further, it says stay away from your parents, your mother, and your father, even if they are died. So that means they couldn't go to his parents' funeral. So if you think about that, that's a little more encompassing. Each one of these is difficult in its own way. So that is the vow that he is to live under. He's not to drink the wine. He's not to drink or not to be near dead people. And he's not to cut his hair. And cutting his hair is what he's remembered for. So as we go on, we covered what does it mean to be a Nazarite. And I want to make sure that we got that covered because it's an important part in Samson's life. Yeah. Right. Correct. Correct. It was. But we see it a little later on when one of these things is really broken, the Lord leaves him. So what does it mean to be a Nazarite? We covered that. What would the child do? So if we go on, what would the child do? And what was Samson's role? Go back to Judges chapter 13. Deliver Israel, because why? They were being naughty again. And to Mike's point, how long does this vow last? His lifetime. And Mike's right. We think of a vow, and it's a short period of time. I vow I'll help you out with this, or, that it at a period of time it ends. Samson, it was his life. That's what God wanted for him, for his whole life. How did Menorah, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, hear about these initial commands? What did you say, Jeff?
Menorah is a candelabra.
Yeah.
Manoah.
Manoah.
You're adding an R that turns into a candlestick.
Okay. He's about as bright as one. I'm sorry.
It's Manoah.
Manoah.
Manoah. You have a Noah, but
Yeah, it's Mom's Noah, all right. Anyway, how did Noah hear about these initial commands? Exactly. And what was his initial thoughts on that? Exactly. His initial thoughts on this are, not quite sure I believe you. I mean, he asks to go and see, and when we read on, went after his wife and said, "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" There in verse 11. And if we look down further in 12, now, when your words come true, I don't think Manoah still is fully on board with this. Mike? Well, true. But when they do, I'll have a little more faith in it as I think about that, because his nameless wife has been barren and known to be barren. So, the guy has to have a little bit of doubt in this. So how do we go on? Not to eat. And Manoah said to the Lord, "Please let us detain you and prepare a young goat for you." So that goes to the question here, the next one. So how did God respond to Manoah in this? What did he do? Actually, I'm down on how did Manoah honor the man of God in the altar. I'm moving a little quick because I need to.
The angel said to offer it to the Lord.
Correct, to the Lord. And how did the angel respond, and what happened? What happened to the goat and the grain offering? It did. It consumed and it went up. Now, if this had been a red...
So something that makes me wonder with that. So would he have had a Levite then in his midst? Because it said at the beginning that he's part of the Danites, so he shouldn't have offered it. But I know back in that time that sometimes families had their own Levites to be able to do offerings.
I'm going to defer to someone with better knowledge of Levites and practices of the Old Testament than me.
Because the Lord also accepted it, so it would have had to have had someone, wouldn't he?
Interesting situation. I thought it was okay, you could do it personally if you're ready. No, sacrifices still had, okay, this was obviously a separate, for lack of a better way to say it, one-off event.
Right.
Because sacrifices were supposed to go to the tabernacle. And this is a,
Doing your garage type thing.
yeah, this is more of a, and it started out, he offered to just fixing dinner.
Right.
And God says, no, you can go ahead and offer a sacrifice, but I'm not going to eat it, just burn it up. Special, specific, God told him to do it that way. It is, you are right though, it is odd that he would have done it that way, but again, God gets to make the rules the way he wants to.
I was thinking if you were a distance away, you could make it.
For if you were too far to bring grain offering, there was one or two of the offerings. If you were too far away, you could sell it and take the money to the tabernacle and just give the money. So there was some of that. If you were too far away, you're right. I do remember some of that. So it is an interesting event, though.
Okay, good. I'm going with the Lord told him to in the chapters. That's what I'm going to go with. So, who was the angel of the Lord, and how do we know this? It says in a few of the verses, and we see some repeat events there.
Well, in verse 22, his wife says, "We have seen
Correct. And his wife said to him,
Oh, I'm sorry, Manoah said that.
right,
I'm sorry.
right. Manoah said to his wife, surely we're going to die. We've seen God. I don't like what his wife said back. She said, if the Lord meant to kill us, he would not have accepted the offering and the grain offering at our hands. He would not have shown us all these things, or now announce to us such things as these.
But I like verse 18 when they ask, "What is your name?"
Yes,
And he
yes.
says, "And the angel of the Lord said to him, Why do you ask my name, seeing that it is wonderful?"
Okay.
And Isaiah 53,
Mhm.
we have his name is Wonderful, Peace, Prince of Peace,
Yep.
Counselor, Eternal Father, all of this. So he's telling him who he is.
Exactly. I'd like to stop right there for a second. You have the King James Version. Can you read 18 for us? 18. Yep. I want to see, verse 18. I want to see if you use a different word. 6:18? Yes, 13:18. Judges 13:18. Because that's one of the things that they point out here in the cheat sheets for the instructors is different versions may have different names. I want to see if King James runs different.
13:18.
Yep.
The angel of the Lord said unto him, Why askest thou thus after my name, seeing it is secret?
Yep.
And in parentheses, wonderful.
Yep. And another translation is secret, wonderful, too wonderful to be understood. So it's interesting that he says that because, yes, he says, why do you ask my name? It's wonderful. So they took the grains and they offered it. Well, we know it was a Christophany because the Lord accepted it. And if it would have been an angel, as we have said before, there'd have been a whole lot of problems in a lot of different places.
But didn't the angel also say to him, when Manoah asked him, he says, "Are you the man?" And he, instead of saying yes, he said, "I am," which is the name of God.
Correct. Yes. Are you the man that spoke to the woman? And he said, I am.
Well, that's what popped into my mind.
He did say that. And mine has it in the ESV, it's in quotes. It's not capitalized or anything else weird like that. So I'm just thinking that's what he said. I am. So after Samson's birth, God was involved in his life in quite a lot of different ways. So let's move to chapter 14, verses 1 through 7. And let's take a look at Samson and how he goes through his life. Judges 14, 1 through 7, and I will read these. Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Problem number one. He came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives, or among all our people, that you must go and take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came toward him roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing but his hand, he tore the lion in pieces, as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. He went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. So, who does Samson want to marry here? Philistine. Yeah. And his parents respond by, not sure this is the right woman for you. Don't you want to marry an Israelite? But what was Samson's motive? Exactly. As we'll see, it gets Samson in a lot of trouble. Yep. And continuing on, we'll see it gets him in trouble. So what was God's plan in this marriage? What was he doing? We see it in verse 4. Yep. He was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines because at the time they had ruled over Israel. And this is the first time we also see Samson's strength. Now, I don't think lions have changed much since what we see now and what they have back then, but they were mighty animals, and to rip them limb from limb with your bare hands, I'm not doing it. I got a hard enough time ripping pigs open after they're dead. Forget a lion. So we see his strength, and we see his courage too. But how was he able to do this? What was, I'll say, the cause of his strength? And we'll see it throughout the lesson.
In verse 6 it says, then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him.
Yep.
And although he had nothing in his hand, he tore a lion in pieces as he would a young goat.
Exactly. So the Lord rushed upon him. It was the Lord giving him strength to take this animal apart limb from limb. So as we move on into more of Samson's adventures, chapter 14, we're going to move down to 18. There we go. And the men of the city said to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey, stronger than a lion? And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would have not found out my riddle. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Askelon, and struck down 30 men of the town, and took their spoil, and gave the garments to those who had told the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. So, in what power did Samson act against the Philistines? Same power that we had the last time. The Lord says, Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. So is the Spirit of the Lord giving him his mighty power. And I need to go to 15:8. Sorry, that's why I didn't get the rest of this. After some days, at the time of harvest, Samson went to visit his wife with a young goat. And he said, I will go in to my wife in the chamber. But her father would not allow him to go in. And her father said, I really thought you had utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead. And Samson said to them, this time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. So Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches. And he turned them tail to tail, and put the torch between each of the pair of tails. Is this where we get that idea for cats? And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines, and set fire to the stacked grain and the standing grain, as well as the olive orchards. Then the Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they said, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion." And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. And the Samson said to them, "If this is what you do, I swear I will avenge you, and after that I will quit." And he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow. And he went down and stayed on the cleft of the rock at Edom. So what we see Samson doing here is the woman that he wanted was given away. Her father said, "I gave him away to your companion. I didn't think you liked her. I thought you utterly hated her," in verse 2. "So I gave him to your companion," which is, I guess, the best man in this case from the descriptions. And the father offered her the younger sister. I find this interesting because it happens more than once in the Bible. So how did Samson respond? Exactly. Lit the foxes' tails, put torches on them, and burned down all the crops. And the Philistines weren't really happy about that. So how did they respond? Yep. If you guys wouldn't have done this, we'd still have our grain, so we're going to burn you now. Olive gardens and everything else.
Interesting that they did the father and the daughter instead of Samson, because he's the one who did the fox
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yep. It is. Excuse me. So after they did that, how did Samson respond again? Yeah, exactly. He hit him. He went back to that. And if we move on, we can see another instance of Samson's power in Judges 15, if I got this right. Yep. 14 and 16. And when he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting at him, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. Key verse again, or key phrase again. And the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that had caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and put out his hand and took it. And with it he struck 1,000 men. And Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have struck down 1,000 men." Now, personally, I don't know how in the world a jawbone of an animal can take out 1,000 men. That must be one strong jaw. But we know that it was done because the Spirit of the Lord rushed him. And again, we see Samson being used by God to take out 1,000 men. And God used Samson to accomplish yet another feat against the Philistines. And in Judges 16, 1-3, we have Samson getting in trouble again. Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a prostitute, and went into her, Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a prostitute, and when he went into her, the Gazites were told, "Samson has come here." And they surrounded the place and set an ambush for him all night at the gate of the city. They kept quiet all night, saying, "Let us wait till the light of the morning, and then we will kill him." But Samson lay till midnight, and at midnight he arose and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts, and he pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that is in front of Hebron. So, in 16, 1 through 3, we see Samson getting in trouble again. He decides to sleep with a prostitute. How does this resemble what we've read earlier so far about Samson?
He has no control over his impulses.
Doesn't have control over his impulses. You gonna say something, Mike? Exactly. Exactly. And how is he able to escape?
Well, he just tears the place apart and walks off with it.
He walks off with the gates. He walks out of there. Absolutely. All right, now let's go to Judges 16, 4. Yep. Correct. Correct. It doesn't, does it? It doesn't say that the Spirit of the Lord runs so strong on them. So we're maybe left to believe that they weren't either well placed in the ground or he really was a strong man to begin with. You know. So as we move into 16, it is that time. We move into 16, 4 through 6. I'm going to read this, and we're going to see where the downfall of Samson comes. After this, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, "Seduce him, and see where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him. And we will give you each 1,100 pieces of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies, and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you." So here we see, and I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick. Samson meets Delilah, and this is where a lot of people who think of Samson, Samson and Delilah is the person who subdued Samson into cutting his hair. And she did. And Samson got overrun, because we find out later in the chapter, let me see if I can actually find the verse, that the Lord had left him. Shaved him head. The Lord left him with, what was that? I think so. I think I blew right past it. Yep. Thank you very much. And she said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And he woke from his sleep and said, "I will go out as at other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. So when he got his hair cut, the Lord left him. And his miraculous strength was no longer. He was just the common guy, and he was humbled. He was. But he let a woman, a pretty lady, get the better of him in the way, if he would have followed the Lord's command and what the Lord had done and what he was set aside to do, he would have been right. The last thing Samson does to bring about the demise of the Philistines actually takes out Samson. When they're having their celebration party, which is basically what 3,000 of these guys were doing, we've finally conquered Samson. Samson says, "Come back to me one more time, Lord. Give me the strength one more time to overcome the Philistines." And the Lord comes back to Samson. But Samson doesn't walk away from it this time. He pulls the 2 pillars down, collapses the building, takes out 3,000 men and himself. He doesn't walk away from this time. The Lord says, "You get your strength back, but you will die with the Philistines." If we see verse 30, and Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life. Then his brothers and all his family came down and took him and brought him and buried him with Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father. And he judged Israel for 20 years. So what are some of the things that we can learn from Samson? In your papers today, I included Samson's failings. And as you go through and relook at that, you can look at what Samson was supposed to do, i.e., stay away from the ladies, and how those failings contributed to his downfall. But also, the last thing is God used Samson to fill out his plan. God knew what was going to happen. God knew that Samson wasn't going to be the best. Mike? Mm-hmm. Yep. No, and then in the temple that was being collapsed, the Philistines were praising Dagon. And when he collapsed the temple, it collapsed it on that whole party. So, Nick, would you close this in prayer quick, please?